It's been said that suffering caused by violence results in the unmaking of worlds. Iraq has seen its share of violence, economic, political, institutional, starting with the boundaries drawn in the sand by the French and the British during conferences on different continents, to ethnic violence between Turks and Kurds, to the rise of the Ba'ath Party and their violent policies of denying essential services to Kurds and Shia Arabs, chemical attacks against the people of Hajumran, Penjwin, and Halabja, the almost total obliteration of an indigenous people in the southern marshes through military force and the destruction of their natural resources. Internal policies spilled over into external interventions, and 1990 brought the Persian Gulf War, including the introduction of depleted uranium weapons into the environment of Iraq from foreign armies. The rest of the 90s brought a silent war when the United Nations began one of the most comprehensive sanctions regimes of modern times, cutting Iraq off from much of the world for some 12 years, until the removal of Saddam Hussein in 2003, which, of course, required and brought with it a lot more violence. The void left by the removal of Saddam Hussein paved the way for years of reprisals by Shia Arabs once they were in positions of power. And once again, the denial of essential services to the other group paved the way for full-on sectarian conflict. Imagine how you would feel if all of this violence happened in your neighborhood. Imagine how you would feel if your children were denied access to the hospital or the medicines that could save their life. What if your neighbor's house, the one across the street, was destroyed by chemically toxic weapons? Can you even imagine napalm burning your skin or mustard gas seeking you out in the most private corners of your home? Now imagine you start seeing your children, the ones born on your street, in your playgroup, your Sunday school class, your boss's child, with missing fingers or limbs, with brain disorders, horrific cancer, and wreckage where their heart should be. How could you cope? Who would you blame? If you're anything like us, you'd blame the ones who brought the violence. You wouldn't chalk it up to coincidence. You wouldn't debate the data. You'd blame the bad guys. And that's exactly what we hear across Iraq whenever we ask, why do you think your children are so sick? For many Iraqi families, blame rests with the ones who did the violence. So how should a member of Saddam's dismantled regime respond to these Shia allegations? Or how does an Arab soldier relate to a Kurdish father whose family he gassed? How should an American or Brit, whether soldier or civilian, enter this fray to pursue peace? Is it even possible to reconcile with someone who blames you for their dying child? We could probably try to present as much data as possible in an argument, and then sit back and wait for the other party to come around to our way of thinking. But that rarely seems to work in our friendships or our marriages. It's hard to imagine it working in such a high-stakes environment like Iraq. But there is another model, hardwired into us all. It's a way to humanize the enemy and begin a relationship. We call it reconciliation through healing, or the provision of life-saving heart surgeries in pursuit of peace between communities at odds. Because just as violence has unmade the world for families across Iraq, by healing their children, those worlds can be remade. One of the families whose world you have remade through healing is Navarre's. Navarre was born with 4 major heart defects. She lives in a border town that goes back to those arbitrary lines that were drawn up in the sand. And as the territorial disputes wage on, her region continues to remain underdeveloped and without the medical systems they need to care for their children. She never had access to the doctors or the hospitals that could save her life. Her world had been unmade. But just as Navarre's suffering had the power to unmake her world, the hands of a surgeon, one that her family thought was their enemy, had the power to remake it. In fact, Navarre's story is now the story for hundreds of children in Iraq. We do pursue treatment as an end to sickness and suffering, but we also pursue reconciliation as an end to violence. Because remaking relationships requires remaking perceptions. There's no way to heal Iraq, or bring peace, or reconstruct, or build a nation. There's only people, individuals, with all their biases, perceptions, stories, and hurts. If we really want peace, we have to begin by remaking the individual worlds that have been unmade in suffering. And when moms and dads believe their children are dying because of someone else's violence, there's no greater opportunity for reconciliation than through providing the healing that leads to wholeness.